I think what's worth acknowledging about Curtis Jones when we're talking about him is that he is still only 23. 23. How many other great players were still developing, are still developing, and are still finding their identity at the age of 23, let alone midfielders who are asked to do so many different things in the modern game and have been asked to do very different things by quite a few different managers. Curtis Jones is one of those guys who could have got lost in the in-between, who could have got lost in, oh, well, you're just an attacking player. Oh, well, you're a ball carrier. Oh, well, you don't really do that. Or you do this, and it doesn't really fit into the kind of profile that we want in our midfield. And he could have got lost in between the cracks at any big club. But Curtis has had a lot of advocates down the years, and Arne Slot is now advocating and being one of those people. Not that I think he was particularly advocating in the first place or anti him, but the press conference in which Arne Slot gave all these great quotes and, you know, the call-up that he's got for the England national team, most probably to get a first-team appearance, is nice. Like, this is a good time to celebrate someone like Curtis. And you know what? I want to start the video by saying I personally always loved Curtis Jones as a player, but I found certain aspects of his game very frustrating. I remember when he burst onto the scene, I remember the early goals that he scored, I remember some of the great finishes that he's had, I remember some of the interplay that he's had, the way that Gerrard, Van Dijk, Henderson, all the big boys from the club have advocated for this young Scouse guy, and a huge part of the reason why he has had so much goodwill to him down the years is because he's a Scouse guy. It's great to see. And obviously Slot, with his tongue-in-cheek, has been speaking about, oh, well, he's been even better since he's become a father. He had a little dip in form, which Slot even recognised. And I like the fact that there is someone who's not been working with him all that long, who's already called him, quote, a quality player. He says, you never know if that plays a part or not. Since the moment he became a father, he started putting in great performances. He always did this in the first few weeks that we worked together in pre-season. I was like, wow, quality player. But then his performances dropped. But since that moment he became a father, he was outstanding again. I think it might have to do with that a bit. But in general, it has to do with things with how the team plays. And that's the other aspect that I really wanted to attack here. How much is individual and how much is down to the way that the team plays. Because Curtis Jones has really only evolved under two very team-oriented managers. Jurgen Klopp, and therefore the managers underneath him, you know, the Buvac's, the Pep Linders types, and also then Arne Slot and the team around him, who we're learning more about and how they manage those young players. And I think, we do have a lot to thank Jurgen Klopp for in bringing someone like Curtis through. He didn't necessarily fit any of the profiles that Liverpool had in their midfield when Curtis was coming through, because really we had three huge archetypes. Fabinho as the 6, Wijnaldum as the 8, kind of like, water carrier, joiner, glue type. And then Hendo as the hard worker, complementary player for Salah and Trent on that other side. And there was a lot of work to be done on that side. And it didn't seem as if Curtis Jones really fit into any of those three. And in fact, Arne Slot even references some of the less pleasant or less, wanted aspects of his game, in that he sometimes thinks he touches the ball a little bit too long. That's something, a criticism, an analysis that we've been talking about for a very long time on this channel. But it also very often led to a lot of people, especially because he was so good on the ball, not acknowledging the fact that off the ball, there is so much work from Curtis Jones. There is a huge shadow. There is a great reading of the game. There is a great reading of positioning. And something that Slot seems particularly good at is getting players to up their reading of the game, understand the space that they're playing in, understand the interconnectedness of that midfield 3, come forward, depending on if, a fullback is dropping in or someone's dropping a little deep, maybe even a 5. And how to use that space, especially in the modern game. And Curtis seems to be stepping that up week on week. And seemingly, he is challenging the Szoboszlai types for that 10, where it's a little bit more creative, but also you're really using your shadow to press the opposition. You're trying to halve the field. You're trying to make the space as small as possible for them to play. He's very good at that because he's got these huge, long legs. He seems very good at winning the ball back with those kind of flappy feet. And he's very good at building from behind and bam, just nipping the ball away because he's great at reading the play. And a lot of people aren't going to acknowledge that. A lot of people aren't going to see he is very good at reading a pass. He really, the game where I really noticed it was the one against Chelsea where, seemingly his match rating's very high and he got that, the lockdown performance that I think the midfield in general, but Curtis Jones in particular, got acknowledged for against Cole Palmer. Cole Palmer was so quiet in that game. There were only a couple of times where he really got to, I mean, there was that one time he got the shot over the bar. He really should have got that on target. Only a couple of times he really got to express himself. And I was really impressed by what Curtis Jones did in that game. And we've been referencing this for a while now. He's been scoring good goals. I think his attacking play and his contribution has been great in terms of hookup and distribution. He's very complementary to the other two guys in McAllister and Gravenberch in midfield in terms of the way that he plays. But I also think he drops back. He's great when he drops deep. I really love Curtis Jones from deep and the build-up play that he has. You very often find him just in front of the penalty area. And I think other players have always appreciated that. But it's been a little while since I think a lot of fans have really just been able to go, oh, that is what he is to us. And Liverpool fans in general, we want our young guys to do well, right? We want our players to be appreciated. But Curtis, it took a little bit longer. I think because of injuries, I think because of temperament. I've met him, he's a lovely guy in real life, but he also comes across as like a little bit unknowable. Then maybe because of the way he speaks, there's like a slight, it's hard to know, like, whether, like, how can I put this? Like, I really like the way he speaks, but it was hard to know what was genuine and what wasn't in what he was saying, because sometimes it felt as if he was performing a little bit in what he was saying. Now, since then, I've learned that maybe there was a speech impediment involved in some way, and I don't want to kind of like call that out too much, because I don't really think that's fair. But I was wondering about what that meant in terms of how filtered he is in terms of the way he speaks, or how performative he is, and how media trained he is. I think he's certainly become a lot better media trained. And since becoming a father, since realizing that responsibility myself, I've also seen my own perception of the world change. And so I'd imagine, especially in the first couple of weeks of having a new child, that's especially informative. I remember the chats that I have with so many of you guys, the chats that we've all had with other people and fathers around us, in speaking about the profound changes that has in your life and for the people around you and for you in being, in changing your identity fundamentally. You're thinking about someone else outside of you. So that's fantastic. But I also think we've seen him pop up as a sub, and the sub is very different to a starter. When we've seen him start, I've loved his performances. But as a sub, you're obviously coming on and you're entering a game state which is constantly changing anyway. You're probably trying to manage a game state which is already there, or you're trying to change a game state which is already difficult to change. And so there's an incumbent nature to what you're doing. And so you have to do something that is going to impress or whatever. You have to change the state of the game. But I think also because you're not getting the time to bed in, you're entering a game which is already at a very high pace, you're probably going up against people who are already warmed up and kind of already mentally in a bit more of a zone than you are, it makes it a little bit more difficult. And I've been really impressed with a lot of his performances in the Champions League and in the Premier League against the teams that were meant to be a bit harder. And I've noticed he's actually played in a lot of these games that were meant to be a bit harder. And what I noticed particularly this season was looking at the ratings in those games, they actually start with a 6 rather than a 7. There are some standout performances. There's like an 8, 7, 8, 7, but then there's like 5 6s over the last 10, 12 games that he's played in, right? And generally, I don't regard that as all that good of a performance. But what I know now is because Curtis Jones's role isn't necessarily going to be appreciated in the stats lines, it is a lot about what you watch. It is a lot about the eye test with Curtis Jones. And the frustration from my perspective is, in a highlights reel, you might see some of the best moments, but then when you watch him in a game, I think the expectation is that he's constantly like that. And when he doesn't fulfill that, when there are a couple of errant passes, or there are people who goes past him, not that happens all that often, frustration begins to build because the expectation is so high with him. And I think that will naturally bring people down. That will naturally bring a guy kind of a little bit lower, because he sort of goes, oh, damn, I've really got to perform here. I really need to, I need to fulfill what it is these people expect of me. And that is a very big weight for a young man to carry, especially in a midfield under Klopp, which was very functional. This is a very reprofiled Curtis Jones. I'm not necessarily saying he's completely different as a player, but I think he's being asked to do quite different things. Not the pressing, not the defensive element, though I do think the defensive element is certainly one that I've noticed a lot more under Slot, just because it seems to be, he's excelled in it. But that doesn't seem to be unusual for our midfield at this point. And like Slot references, the system and the people around him have really helped him to maximize that element of his game. He got an 8.2 against Chelsea. His heat map was absolutely fantastic. He was the man of the match for us. But when you look at it, it was actually very concentrated in that area of the field where he would have had to monitor a lot of Cole Palmer. And so getting the hookup play, all those kind of things, fantastic. but playing a very specific role for your manager, giving your manager the satisfaction of knowing that he can trust you out in the field, there is a trust between him and the managers, that, I think, is really special. And it complements, like I said, the other guys. We've seen him play as part of the Grav, Curtis, Szoboszlai midfield when Alexis McAllister was used as a sub for him against Chelsea. But I think broadly what we're seeing here now is he's being trusted in multiple different positions. And he complements and can replace elements of what Gakpo brings, of what McAllister brings, of what Szoboszlai brings. Having that adaptability in midfield is fantastic. Now, first of all, or last of all, I think it helps very often to have these great players around him. And I think as the team grow and the squad grow, there will be higher expectations of him. He still has a very high ceiling. Like Slot said, there's a quality player in there. And I think that quality player is only just coming out at 23. You imagine what the ceiling is. He's now only just going to get the recognition for England, alongside Trent, alongside those other guys, who again, it's a very specific role you play for Liverpool. You go in to play for England, and sometimes that unlocks elements of your ability. Sometimes it takes a little while to unlock that, because players are seeing it in training, but in a game it's a little bit different. Your expectation, the fans, there's lots of things that work around a player like Curtis Jones. He was very good for the under-21s when he performed in that tournament. But again, it was sort of like, well, he's over 21 now, maybe he should be doing that. And the same goes for Harvey Elliott, those kind of people. These are people who've had astronomical rises and, like I said, play very specific roles, have focused on very specific parts of their game. So now it's time to grow those things out. And the expectation of Jones next is consistency and performance and leadership out in the field. Being a scouser in the team carries, holds, brings elements of responsibility, which I think other people, me, loads of people outside the city don't really understand. You see your family on a weekly basis, people who live in the city who care about those things. You see other people that you've grown up with from the city who care about those things. You have a deeper link that, no offense to anyone who's moved from outside the country, I'm sure they all have great links to the city, but you see that, you feel that, you remember what it was like when Liverpool lost, when Liverpool won as a kid. And those things, I think they still apply very much to you can relate to them, but relating to them as someone who came from the city is very different than someone who, goes, oh, I remember this, but in Lisbon. Oh, I remember this, but in Buenos Aires. Oh, I remember this, but in X. That, I think, is really important. And I think what we're really seeing here is Curtis Jones has outperformed and is outperforming a lot of his counterparts, a lot of the people who are his peers. Cole Palmer, Jadon Sancho, in that game specifically. Madueke, Lavia was in that midfield. Moises Caicedo is in that midfield. Those kind of names are names that we would have all been very excited to have signed at Liverpool. And I think sometimes because they come through the academy, because there wasn't a shiny price tag attached to him, Curtis Jones goes for like 50, 60 million at this point in this current market. But let's just acknowledge this, and I think it is worth really acknowledging this. Curtis Jones is an athlete. Curtis Jones has come through the Liverpool setup. He shows that there is acknowledgement of bringing you through and that there is a path into areas where, realistically, especially in this model, Liverpool are going to want to, continue to bring people through, save themselves money, or essentially show that their investment is worthwhile. And I think those are great things that Curtis shows. Obviously, there is also the fact that he's been backed and been around amazing players down the years. You've had him around Hendo, a great leader. You've had him around Thiago, a great striker of the ball. Fabinho, a great defender. He's alongside other people in his generation now, in Gravenberch, and plenty of other young Liverpool players. The Quansas, the Bradleys, Harvey Elliott. There are plenty of people for him to look around. But also, obviously, the great players that are around him as well and the great support that he's had. Virgil immediately behind him very often on the field. Ahead of him, Mo Salah. Ahead of him, Diaz. Andy Robertson on the other side of that. There are many different types and archetypes of players in there that he can take a bit of his game from. And I believe he's probably actually taken some of his game from. So I think it's worth just acknowledging that in this Liverpool timeline, and that attracts other players too. That shows what an attractive prospect we are. Not only does it motivate Liverpool Academy guys, it also motivates people to join the Academy. We've grown that guy. That guy has come from the system and the hard work and the mindset and the brain of everything that happened at the club and saved the club a whole lot of money. I think it's just worth meditating on that a little bit, right? As a group of fans. Because I think it can go underestimated. And also, in the past, the haircut, the look, all those things, they're things that I think a lot of other people outside of Liverpool make fun of. It's nice to see that those things come back and just slap them in the face and go, yeah, this kid's a Scouser. There's nothing more satisfying than that for me. By the way, he had an 8.2 against Leverkusen. That is... I actually want to see if that made him man of the match. No, Luis Diaz was man of the match, obviously. But again, that there was a complementary element to what he did on the other side of the pitch for Trent and Mo and all those guys. Look how many different roles he can play. I'm just saying. It's worth considering as he gets his first England call-up, as he probably gets his first senior cap. Just mark that moment. Do you know what I mean? Because Slot and everyone else around him are really helping to bring those people up. Oh yeah, hope he performs well. I worry about the injury record a little because especially when he goes away with something like England, things change, you got out of rhythm, all those kind of things. I just hope he can push on this season because I think this was make or break for him. And I think very often forming a bond with a new manager is tricky. And especially when you were such a Klopp guy. I remember a lot of people from the journalist section sort of saying that they really remember that he was upset or kind of impacted by Klopp leaving. And the worry, I guess, is that impacts your playing time, your career, and your bond with the new manager. Slot's clearly coming in bonded with a lot of these guys. That really helps. It's just nice to praise these people, and especially when they've had a hard trip like him. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Hope you stick around. Go and hit the Patreon. Go and hit the Discord, and I'll see you guys in there. Much love.